Hello, thanks for joining. Graham Wallace here, Belly Up Sports baseball writer, also a contributor at Jay's Journal. Joined today by Allan Cosman, fellow Belly Up Sports member. Thanks so much for joining me, Allan.
Hey, no problem, Graham. It's always fun to talk Blue Jays.
Yeah, we're going to be throwing it back a little bit here. A lot of fun. I've been kind of doing this Blue Jays all-time team. The first part one came out last week with the rotation. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we get into it, Allan, why don't you tell the people a little bit about what you do at Belly Up Sports and your other endeavors?
Well, at Belly Up Sports, it's an opportunity for me to learn graphic design, just kind of on my own, just kind of doing it for Graham first, I think, and a couple other
Yeah.
writers that I regularly do graphics for their articles. It's experience that I never would have got somewhere else. Belly Up's really good to work with. I'd recommend them to anybody that wants to start in sports. Also, I run the Ryan Graves fan page on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Just supporting a local hometown NHL player who doesn't get a lot of support compared to the big superstars.
So with no further ado, let's get right into it. I came out with my part one of the all-time 25-man roster last week with the rotation. Now I did do it as kind of a 5-man rotation, and my top, I did have a bit of debate, a bit of contention there at the beginning. But for me, the number one guy was Roy Halladay, the Doc. Did you have any problems with that?
No, he would have been my number one as well, for sure.
Yeah, before I did this, I was kind of throwing it out there. Maybe Dave Stieb is the best Blue Jays pitcher of all time. He's the only one of their pitchers who threw a no-hitter. He also had 3 really close no-hitters as well. But when I took a little bit of a deeper dive into the numbers, I just found that Halladay was a little bit more dominant. He did win the Cy Young as well, something Stieb was never able to do. I noticed after I posted, I did take a peek in the comments. There were a couple people that were actually saying Steve should be number one. What are your thoughts on that?
Overall, I mean, Steve was kind of before my time, so I look back on him and yeah, I realized he was the only one to have a no hitter. He was on the '92 team, I believe.
I think he was, yeah.
Yes, and so I mean that's stuff that Halle, of course, like we said, never had, but Halliday had a long-standing career with the Jays. That was his pinnacle of his career was there. He did do well later on, as a lot of Jays do, but no, I think Halliday overall would have passed him.
Um,
Yeah.
Now going to the rest of the top, the starting 5, I should say, we had a lot of the same picks. So we kind of talked about this before. Roger Clemens and Pat Henkin, a couple of guys we see there behind you. I think these were no doubt selections. The one where we did differ was I had Jimmy Key in mind, and you threw one out that kind of surprised me a little bit. David Price, he was only a Blue Jay for about half a season. I was a little surprised by that. What about Price made you want to put him on your all-time Jays roster?
When you go back and look at Price, I mean, he was one of those guys that you faced when you played against the Rays or you played against Detroit that you hated to face because he shut down so many clubs on so many occasions and did so well. And for him
Yeah.
to finally come to your team and play on your side, and that year they were pretty successful. I mean, that was one of the years that they come back to the postseason.
Yeah, I believe that was 2015, and I'll never forget the excitement in Rogers Center for Price's first start. It was just electrifying, and it feels
Yes.
like they only lost about a handful of games over the last 3 months of the season or so. They were just red hot. It seemed like they were destined to go to the World Series. Obviously, they came up just short against the Kansas City Royals, but some really good memories of those teams for sure. For me, I had to go with Jimmy Key. He was just my guy when I was a little kid. There was just something about this guy. He was just such a cool player, so calm, and he just never seemed to be. He never seemed to be under the gun. He seemed unflappable, in other words. So I had to include him. I also really wanted to have a lefty in there. Obviously, you had a lefty as well, but you just went with Price instead. Um, I want to go to, by the time this comes out, part two will come out, which I made the battery or the catchers and the infield. So I want to talk a little bit about the catchers. So for my all-time team, this was a no doubter. Probably my first favorite player when I was a real little kid was Ernie Whitt. I loved his mustache. I loved his consistency, his leadership, power, you name it, the way he handled the pitching staff. To me, Ernie, he was the best pitcher, or excuse me, catcher in Blue Jays history. What say you?
For me, it was kind of hard. I had catcher wasn't my favorite position. I mean, my first one is the one I remember the most, and his stats wise, not really a great one, but he did okay. His iconic thing was his catcher's mask. So I picked Charlie O'Brien because that stood out to me. He was the pioneer of the hockey catcher's mask,
Yes.
the goalie style, and they were cool painted. Just his flowing hair, his mustache, goatee. I mean, he just had that iconic look that you wouldn't forget. And
No,
he
I like
wasn't a
that.
bad guy behind the plate. Um, that he just stands out to me as my favorite catcher. And that was after Pat Borders. Like I said, I kind of started watching 95, 96 timelines, so I missed the World Series times.
I want to start at first base. There's a lot of really quality candidates here when you think about Fred McGriff, John Olerud. But for me, it was a pretty clear-cut choice, Carlos Delgado.
100%.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you went with the same one.
Oh yeah, Carlos was going to be on my list. I mean, he's in my picture, and
Yeah.
yeah, Carlos was one of those guys you could. He's like one of the leaders in most of the batting categories. If he's not the top, he's like the top three in almost every batting category for the Jays. I mean,
Yeah, he is.
yeah,
Yeah, he just had that great smile, and yeah, 336 home runs, which is most of all in Blue Jay history. He had a couple. I believe he had 150 home run season, 340s, and he had 7 years of at least 30, and he had 25 the year before that, his first full time season. So to me, there wasn't much doubt about that. Now, second base, I think presented a lot of good options, but I went with the one that just happened. I really hope they can find a way to get him back onto their team for next year. Marcus Semien, he had maybe the best second season by second baseman in baseball history. So he has to be number one, right?
uh, that was again like I had a hard time with that one. He's on my like what's the word? He's on my next ones on the list.
Yeah, no,
But I
that's
picked
okay.
Roberto Alomar. I mean, just for what he brought to the whole franchise when he came over from San Diego with Joe Carter.
Now, shortstop for me, um, it was also a pretty obvious choice just because he's my favorite Blue Jays player of all time. I got to meet him when I was a little kid. It's still one of the thrills of my life. Tony Fernandez. This guy was money from the late mid 80s into that trade. Obviously, he was part of that trade that really turned the Blue Jays around, but he was able to rejoin the team in 1993 to be part of the second championship. I just love this guy. He was a great guy and just smooth as butter defensively, and really productive player offensively throughout his prime and really throughout his career as well. How about you? Who'd you have at shortstop?
I picked Gonzo, Alex Gonzalez, the one from the '90s.
Yeah.
I was looking through the list today. I seen there was the other guy that I think played for the Marlins had come through. Maybe I'm wrong there, but there's another
Oh,
Alex Gonzalez. But anyway,
yeah.
it was the one from the '90s who was the long tenured shortstop for them. He was so awesome on the in the field. His hitting was not the greatest, but he was a really really awesome shortstop on the field. And I just remember him. That was like I said, my time when I was watching ball, when I was really impressionable, and those were my good years watching baseball. So he was my pick. I
Um,
remember Ed Sprague from back in the '90s, his 36 home runs and like it was well over 100 RBIs in one year. There, he had stood out. And that was always my benchmark with hitters, was the 30 and 100.
Yeah.
And I just remember that from one of those first few years I was watching ball. But no, definitely Donaldson takes the cake for that one.
Yeah, Ed Sprague is a guy I definitely rooted for. He also had that really famous pinch hit home run in the 1992 World Series. He was also married to a United States Olympian swimmer, Christian Babs Sprague, I want to say. I remember watching the old VHS of
Yeah.
the 1992 World Series. They'd always kind of mention that. So that's pretty funny. Okay, well, Allan, thanks so much for joining me. It's always great to talk Blue Jays baseball with you, especially going back to some of those great years that they had over the last, 25 years or so. I think there's some great times on the horizon as well. This team seems to be on the cusp of something great. So it'll be really exciting to watch them over the next few years.
Definitely, yeah, for sure. It's going to be another great bunch. They're already on fire.
Yeah. So it'll be a fun winter as well as they try to lock up some of the free agents that they have right now. And we'll keep stick and stay with bellyupsports.com and Jay's Journal, as well as I plan on tracking all of the offseason acquisitions and moves right there. All right. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thanks, Graham.